Well, it seems like President Donald Trump is using his last resort to get out of the Iran war. He has reverted to economic pressure, which is a shift from his recent military strikes back to economic warfare. Amid the Hormuz talks getting stalled, the Trump administration is now betting that sanctions, a naval blockade, and mounting economic pressure can force Tehran back to the negotiating table with a weaker position.
Well, that's right. Reports suggest that Trump may be mulling more sanctions against Iran. Earlier this week, the U.S. president had demanded compensation from Iran, further intensifying the rift in the talks and throwing the future of the Strait of Hormuz into deep uncertainty. The demand came after Iran itself called for war reparations from the United States and Israel for the destruction caused by months of military action.
Well, we're going to ask for money for the damage they've done over a 50-year period. Whether you go SS Cole or whether you go all of the people that were so badly hurt, so badly wounded or killed, many thousands of people, and maybe damages for the 52,000 protesters over the last 4 months that were killed in Iran. We think their family should get damages for killing their person or their child or mother, father that were protesting. It's at least, it was 52,000 a month and a half ago. So now what is it? So if there's damages to be paid.
Now remember, there is a fundamental question facing Washington at the moment. Can economic pressure succeed where military force and diplomacy have so far failed? Remember, the United States and Iran agreed to an interim ceasefire in June this year, but that arrangement didn't quite help.
Fighting resumed, and Washington has since continued military operations on and off while restricting Iranian shipping. Now, the administration is once again resorting to economic pressure. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth says the U.S. military can maintain its naval blockade indefinitely. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has also warned that Washington is preparing additional measures aimed at isolating Iran economically.
Well, the shift comes as the U.S. weapons stockpiles have dwindled and the talks are reaping no results yet. The immediate target is Iran's ability to generate revenue. As per a Financial Times report, Iranian oil exports have fallen sharply, with shipping and satellite data indicating that its main oil export infrastructure has been largely idle. The International Monetary Fund estimates the overall economy of Iran has shrunk by 5.4%, and the Iranian government recently reported an annual inflation rate of 88.6%.
In an interview earlier this week, the president had asserted that Iran doesn't have money left to fight the war further. He said, and I quote, "I'm their banker."
But economic pain does not necessarily translate into political concessions. Analysts say Iran's leadership may already be prepared to absorb the enormous economic costs instead of surrendering its leverage over the Strait of Hormuz.
Iran seems to be unfazed by this pressure. Ismail Baghei, spokesperson for Iran's foreign ministry, said, and I quote, "Whenever Washington proves itself incapable of pursuing diplomacy, it retreats into sanctions, and whenever those sanctions fail to produce results, it simply increases the dose." Now, President Trump says the United States has total control over the Strait of Hormuz, while Iran says they decide what happens in the strait. Attacks continue not just in Hormuz, but in focus has shifted to Bab el-Mandeb and Red Sea as well. Most recently, 2 UAE-operated oil tankers were attacked by drones while transiting through the strait. The UAE blamed Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps. So can economic pressure change Iran's behavior? Well, not really. In fact, the pressure is not free of cost for the United States or the global economy.
Well, disruption in the Strait of Hormuz reduces the flow of energy through the critical global choke point, contributing to higher oil prices and increasing pressure on consumers, which essentially means the longer the standoff continues, the more the administration faces a political calculation of its own. Can Washington withstand the economic consequences long enough to force Tehran to blink? That is the big question. For now, President Donald Trump appears to be caught in a fix, and despite sanctions, blockade, and military deterrence, the immediate question is whether the President of the United States of America can get his way in this war.
Dr. Ian Ralby is the president of Auxilium Worldwide and a recognized expert in maritime security. He's now joining us live on the broadcast from Baltimore. Ralbi, thank you very much for making time for us and welcome to the broadcast. Are sanctions weakening America's adversaries or America itself? Your reaction?
It's a very good question, and I think that what we've done is use sanctions as our tool for so long that we've sanctioned so much of the world it has created its own community. We've kicked so many out of the global economic tent that they form their own tent. And this is something we need to be very careful about, because splitting the global economy is extremely dangerous for global stability. What we've seen is that countries like Russia, Iran, Venezuela, North Korea, and others have started to work together with key enablers. And those enablers are some of the biggest, most powerful, wealthy states in the world. And so what we now see is the BRICS, for example, containing all of those states and working as an economic unit that is now beginning to protect that economic interest with military power. They were exercising in South African waters earlier this year, doing naval exercises, much like we've seen the European Union move from an economic community into a community that has a naval force to back it up. And so this means that 49% of the world's population is currently in the BRICS, and about 56% will be if the ongoing membership expansion continues. That is a really concerning situation because most of the sanctioned world is in that economic bloc, and it means that off-dollar trading could occur without any kind of imposition of penalties from the U.S. financial institutions or other regulators. That will fracture how the world works.
You know, which is what I was coming to next, Dr. Yen, that don't you think then that, you know, the United States of America risks losing leverage because countries now, and several of them have already started, building alternatives to its economic system, to the American economic system?
Yes, I think if you're going to talk about competition, which is how the U.S. phrases its global posture with many of the other key peer states, you have to be competing. You have to put value propositions on the table. And if your value proposition is either you do what we say or we punish you, it doesn't feel very appealing for a lot of countries around the world when there is another option on the table that may seem more attractive. And I think the U.S. is starting to potentially feel the effects of having talked about competition but not having actually competed. At the same time, an America First policy may sound very good on the home front, but what it does is it isolates the United States and its economic relations with the rest of the world. Punitive tariffs are being used very prolifically by the United States administration right now. Unfortunately, people don't like being punished very much, and so when they have a choice between continuing to work with that punishing power or with somebody else, they may choose somebody else.
Dr. Ian, finally, who do you think is getting hurt the most? Is it Americans or is it the world when Donald Trump uses tariffs and now sanctions to hurt the world?
Well, very sadly, I think everybody suffers, and that's the real truth. Ultimately, the geopolitics of it are somewhat irrelevant, but when communities that are already on the brink of starvation, of poverty, of challenges that are so extreme, we are talking about basic human survival, are no longer able to afford any kind of means towards advancing life, everybody begins to suffer. And what we're seeing is those margins are being crossed, those thresholds are being crossed all over the world. Americans will suffer. There's a time delay, though, because we have had such a fortunate run. But there is likely a point at which the bottom will fall out. And unfortunately, as we come into the winter months this year, the effect not only of tariffs, but of this war and the sort of attempt to control the world by narrative rather than by reality will end up falling apart because, unfortunately, you can't heat a home with a narrative or a talking point. You have to heat it with fuel, and if it's not available, it just isn't available. And if it's too expensive, you just can't purchase it.
All right, so let's see and, you know, wait and see what really happens in this war. Dr. Ian Ralbi, thanks very much for joining us on WION and sharing your perspective.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.